so excited to announce the very first guest of the Provoking the Conversation podcast. Ashleigh, thank you so much for joining me. Ashleigh here is a personal trainer. She's also the author of this wonderful book, In Case I Never Told You, which we will touch on today. Ashleigh, first of all, how's everything going? How are you doing currently?
I'm doing all right, but thank you again for having me as your guest. I really appreciate you reaching out. But everything's been all right. I mean, the whole quarantine thing is kind of dampered life a little bit, and especially with everything going on right now in the world, with Floyd and everything. It's really confusing time, to say the least.
Yeah, I agree. And this is a unique time, and we'll talk about 2020. We'll talk about 2020 in the history books. If I'm blessed to have children, I'll be telling them about, some of the things that went on during this year, not only with COVID-19, but also with the riots and just seeing where this all goes. But other than, COVID-19 and, some of the protests and riots, how's, personal life, everything's good, you're not in debt with the collection agencies or nothing like that. No one's looking for you, right?
Thank God, not anymore.
not anymore.
Yep. No, everything's been good. I've just been really promoting my book, and then working with my clients virtually, which isn't the same as, actually being in a gym, but you got to do what you got to.
So you talk about clients. So you're a personal trainer. How did you stumble upon that career? Because I know we have a connection from school, but I don't think you've ever mentioned personal trainer when we interact in school. So tell me a little bit more how you came to be a personal trainer.
Well, so basically I always loved sports and I was athletic. But right before college, I ended up getting pretty sick. It kind of limited my ability to work out, and I ended up gaining a lot of weight throughout college. I always struggled with my weight too. I always fluctuated. I was always the bigger friend and stuff like that. And then when I moved back to Pennsylvania in 2017, I was pretty much at my heaviest, and I was also in a very depressed state. And my friend actually told me about this one gym. It's more of a group kind of training, high intense intervals. So I did it with her, and I ended up having a lot of success with it because of my athletic background. It doesn't take much for me to perform that way. And basically the owner of the gym approached me and said that he thought I would be a really good trainer. I always trained people on the side, but nothing where it was a career. And then when he approached me with that, that's when I started studying for my exams. I went underneath his wing because he was a master trainer, and he kind of taught me the ropes. And then I started training at his facility, and I did that for 2 years. And then I broke off and I started Amped Up Fitness, which is my own personal fitness. And then I also work alongside 2 other personal trainers in Finesse Fitness.
Wow. Okay. So, and what you said about kind of being an athlete or a former athlete and kind of getting it backed up, it's like riding a bike. It's okay, I can do this.
Yeah, it just literally felt like practice. That's why I like that type of training, HIIT training, because it's more like you were at a volleyball practice and your coach is telling you to do suicides. It's not just always typical weightlifting and stuff like that. So that's what kind of sparked my interest more in being a personal trainer in that aspect.
Gotcha. And HIIT training is definitely hard. One of the apps that I use to actually work out, it focuses really on HIIT training. I've lost a lot of weight, more leaner. So it's definitely challenging. So with you being a personal trainer, so you said Amped Up Fitness is yours. How do you build your clientele? Do you mostly focus on social media? Is it people that you know?
Well, I was very fortunate with getting the opportunity to work at that specific gym. And basically I built a relationship with these individuals. They became my advertisement for myself because they love the way that I train. I also train you to hit your goals, but I also get you to open up so I can see what brought you to the point that you were at. A lot of people gain weight due to depression or anxiety and stuff like that, or something that happened to them in their past. So that's what kind of set me apart from most trainers. I'm just not about your body transforming, I'm about your mind transforming as well. So a lot of them became word of mouth for me. And then I took more to social media once I kind of got that clientele that can help post and make it seem more official. Because a lot of people won't support you until you've already made it. So it's like the sad truth. So I needed them to kind of show my credibility.
It's very true. Sometimes hard getting support. I'm actually really happy because when I look at my podcast stats, I'm like, oh, 10 people listen to me.
Yeah.
Great, you know. So hopefully this takes off. That's and the point that you made about, you know, not only dealing with the body but also the mind is very, you know, crucial and things like that. And that's something that we kind of got from your book too, you know, mental health, things like that, and we'll hit on that. So talk about a little bit more. So you talked about how when people come in, you also try to impact the mind. Just talk about a little bit how you do that. You know, how do you dig into that and really use it as a tool to get them to their, not only their mental goals, but their physical goals as well?
So basically, when I meet any clients, first thing I do is I tell them about myself, and I kind of build a friendship with them to the point where they feel comfortable with sharing certain information with me. And I also tell them my journey. I tell them how I really did struggle with depression and anxiety, and this kind of became my outlet. Um, and a lot of people feel more comfortable training with someone who's been through it. Because I know me personally, when you're just automatically with a fit person from birth and all that stuff, it can be not intimidating, but more so discouraging because they don't relate to the struggle in that aspect. So basically I tell them my journey, and then they just start feeling comfortable to the point where they start opening up to me. I start putting out like feeler questions about, well, what about yourself don't you like? Why don't you like this? And then we get into deeper questions about, well, what kind of brought you to the point where you said this is too much, or brought you to this transition? And that's when I started learning that a lot of people held on to past experiences and just went to food. Something that they can control is something that they put into their mouth and stuff like that. So once I get them to open up, that's when it turns more into like, you just got a friend now. And if we solve the aspect about what's going on in your mind mentally, then we can help you not repeat it. We can help you kind of get more outlets that you can use instead of food.
Wow,
So, yeah.
that's pretty amazing. I think that's a great thing, because one thing about, you know, with speaking about my own experience trying to get back into fitness, because of course I was a collegiate athlete, and then once you stop being a collegiate athlete, you kind of get a little bit lazy. And one of the things for me, it took one of my friends to kind of do something similar to what you do with your clients and say, you know, what don't you like here? Well, I don't like how I like so much, you know, belly flat, you know, things like
Mhm.
that. Okay. And, you know, why are you eating these certain things? Well, it's a one thing I can control, but in my experience, and then talking to this friend, he was like, well, surprisingly, you can control this too. You can control, you know, how you end up looking and how much it would help your mental, your physical, and things like that. So I I think that's amazing. You know, I think that's something that's really special. And I think, you know, something that I always talk about, at least what I do, I'm a trainer, so I deal with people too. But before I teach them any information or anything like that, I try to get to know the person first. And I think we kind of, you know, in our professional careers and things like that, we push that to the side a little bit, but that's really where we should start. And maybe
Absolutely.
if we started there, we would be avoiding some of the things that are happening now. But, you know, it's better to learn now, you know, instead of trying to learn later.
Exactly. Yeah. I think people are so busy on the aspect of becoming successful that they don't care most of the time about the people that help bring their success. And I started getting to the point where I determined my success based on the number of people that I had. But then I started looking at it that I'd rather have those loyal clients that stood by me when I was leaving the gym, every up and down, and still were posting about me I would much rather have 4 loyal clients than have 50 clients that come and go as they please, not consistent. So that's why these people became my friends, because they really did support me through a lot, and I supported them through a lot. So when you know people, it makes it more enjoyable for yourself as well.
Gotcha. So personal trainer, I know the personal trainer at the gym used to go to before quarantine happened. She was a big 4 or 5 days a week working out. So I'm just gonna ask you, how many days a week do you work out? Because I work out 5, but I feel like I'm slacking when I see the stuff on your page. Like, should I be working out right now? Should I not be eating this donut?
So mine varies basically, but a lot of it again is helping me with my mental state. So I learn when I go consecutive days, like 2 days without working out, then I start noticing I kind of get into a slump and I need to start working out. So I really work out about anywhere between 4 to 6 days a week based upon what I'm doing. If I'm going to be doing 6 days a week, there's going to be 1 or 2 of those days where it's just jump roping, core, cardio, and HIIT training. I don't lift 6 days a week.
Right.
No.
Yeah, you can't lift 6 days a week, be walking around here with no neck, nothing like that.
I know.
Boys get real deep, be like, hi, I'm Ashleigh. Oh,
Yeah,
nope,
I know.
can't be
And then
doing
no one
that.
wants to train with you. Yeah.
Right. So kind of transitioning here. So we talked about you being a personal trainer and, the dealing with the mind and also the body. So you kind of told me the story about you starting to be a personal trainer. How did this book kind of come into becoming alive? Was this a collection of just thoughts you had sitting on your laptop or sitting on your phone, like, this would be a nice book. Let me just publish this. How did this book, and again, for everyone listening, the book is just called Case I Never Told You. It is available on Amazon. I will include the link in the bio of this episode as well, everybody, so you can look at it. I do recommend it. It's very opening, and I'll talk about some things I loved about it as well. But how did the book kind of come to be?
Well, it was never intended to be a book. So it was actually, so in 2017, I hit like my all-time low. Throughout high school, I always turned to self-harm. I did used to cut, and I did have eating disorders. There would be periods where I would go 2 weeks where I'm only drinking water and having a little bit of bread and stuff like that. And in 2017, when everything kind of fell apart, I was sitting there and I was considering cutting again. And I looked in the mirror and I kind of just had this like epiphany that if I'm resorting back to that, I'm just going backwards. So instead, I ended up picking up a pencil and I wrote to my user, because at this time there was a situation that was happening, which I felt was the reason why I was in this big depression. But then once I started writing and basically writing the things I wish I could say to this specific person, I then went on to writing the very next one to my abandoner, which was actually written about my father who left when I was just a baby. And I realized that I had a lot of stuff piling up that I didn't think necessarily was affecting me still, but it was. So it really was actually a diary. And it wasn't until I told someone who I was working with that I wrote this, like my friend from work. And she asked if she could read some of it. And I gave it to her. And the next day she came in and she was like, wow, like this took me back to this situation in my life. And she started telling me her story about one of my chapters. And it was nice for me to see her opening up and telling me her story and how the words impacted her and took her back, and how she wished she could have had these words to be able to tell someone about her situation. And it was just amazing to me that her situation was so different from mine, but the pain was the exact same. Mm-hmm. So that's why she ended up telling me that this had to be shared. It could really help a lot of people. And that's kind of what triggered it, because I'm always big on people starting to opening up and getting their mental health in check. So she kind of pushed me to turn it into a book.
That's actually, when I talk to people who write books, unlike myself, that's how a lot of it started. It starts out just writing something, and then someone else reads it, like someone needs to read this. But about the book itself, and just when I read it and how I felt, I'm telling you, I judged the book by its cover. I'm like, am I really gonna be able to relate to this book? Because again, me and you come from different backgrounds, but when you open it up and you start reading the situations, it does relate to you more than you think it does. Especially the parts that resonated with me was one like the thoughts of ending it all. That's a darker part of the book, but when I was younger, I had these thoughts too, and they passed my mind. But you also mentioned some, key triumphs, such as the part going from when you looked in the mirror and kind of, like you mentioned, that epiphany and, started to get better. And also the one that really stood out to me was the obstacles, because I always felt like in life you're going to face obstacles, but the way you wrote that is that you made them sound like they were needed. They wasn't negatives in your life. They were things that they were there with a purpose. And that kind of made me change the way I looked at, my obstacles, no matter if they're my student loan payments, getting to work on time, getting up, I might be a little sore from my workout, whatever it may be, these things start to help shape you. The other part of it that really stuck out, and maybe you can shed some light on, is it's never too late to change. Was that one of the earlier ones, if you can remember? Because I could see that being written like, okay, I'm going to change better for myself. Or was this more at the end like, wow, I came such a far way, and I think I need to write this to myself and say, like, there's never too late for me to change kind of how my life is going.
Well, so when I wrote that one was towards the beginning. But that one actually built off of my relationship with my father. I ended up meeting my dad when I was in high school. That was the first time I met him because my mom accidentally ran into him at a Walmart, and we didn't even know he was in the same state as us.
Always Walmart. It's always Walmart.
Always Walmart. But the It's Never Too Late was actually talking about how our relationship, we now build a relationship. And it had multiple meanings because it also talks about the growth in myself, but it was more so the fact of forgiving someone. And it's never too late to try to correct mistakes that you've made. And actually, me and my father have matching tattoos that say it's never too late.
Wow.
Because that was the chapter for him for the redemption. But his story and my story is a bigger picture of basically about redemption and forgiveness and the strength to admit your flaws. And that's how it actually came to be. So it was one of my earlier chapters. And throughout reading the book, when I go back and read it, I can kind of see where I'm at mentally when I wrote each chapter. And you can see the difference between each page, actually.
So when I read the book, I read it as in these things, are they in order or are they kind of out of order? The different chapters about your development from when you kind of, as you described, rock bottom to basically where you were when you ended the book or right now.
So when I was writing it as my diary, it was just more, everything was kind of sporadic. So the first chapter was actually to my user. And then it went to the one about my father. And then for my father, I thought about my mother. And that's when I wrote about to my role model and stuff like that. So it was really how it's in the book is not how it was necessarily written. I tried to put it in the book more so things can pile together. Like, so the one of the first chapters is to my depression. And then the next one is to my anxiety. Those two kind of pair up together because those are emotional states. And then I tried to throw in periodically some of the more positive chapters, like to my faith, to my role model and stuff like that. So you had kind of your pick-me-ups in there, and you could see that you're going to go through different types of emotions throughout this. Some things are going to trigger upsetting thoughts for you. And that's why after each chapter, I have the self-reflection pages, because this book is very specific to my life. So people who know me, when they first read it, the first time they read through it, they were trying to figure out who each chapter was about. But people who don't know me, you can read it and it could be so specific to your life that you forget that this is actually my story. And that was really what kind of set it apart for me to think that this might actually be beneficial to people.
Yeah, and that's the self-reflection pages were something that was unique about this book that stood out to me as well. I did use a couple, but I kind of periodically, especially with the chapters kind of hit me. But going back to your comment, you said how this book it's basically your story, but how it could directly relate to you know, almost a lot of different people, including myself. There's a phrase that comes to mind is that my grandmother used to say. She says, "We all walk the same road, we just take different steps." So we all go through
Exactly.
similar experiences, similar things. It's just a little different, and I think that also a little bit relates to the events are happening now with the protests and George Floyd and the killing of George Floyd. Is that we're all on the same road together. It's
Hmm.
not white versus black, or this, or Hispanics versus black, or whatever you want to say. It's all of us against hate, or racism, or how people are mistreated. We're all on this road together. We all live in the same country, all on the same earth. So I think that's another thing that kind of resonates, just going with the times of today. And I thought that was really cool. You actually put the self-reflection in there, because now it makes it interactive. So one of the things, me as a training specialist, I'm constantly trying to find ways to interact with trainees. How can I get you involved? Because then once you're involved, humanly in your brain, once you're involved in something, you remember. It sticks
Hmm.
with you. That's why I remember certain parts of the book just off the top of my head, because I wrote something down with it. So I don't
Yeah.
know if you did that by design, like, oh, I'm gonna just engage them. You probably just did that because you thought it would be something, really nice to put in a book. But that's essentially what you did. You engaged your audience, without actually really engaging them, which is really great.
Yeah, that was kind of the thought process behind it, because because originally I didn't think about even having it, but it wasn't until my friend at work told me her story and how different it was from mine. I thought it would be so therapeutic if she could have written her own version of that story. So there are some chapters. I do have a chapter on there about addiction. I personally never went through addiction, but I watched someone go through it. And it would be different. Someone who has gone through addiction, who's reading that, they can either take that as, wow, now I have insight on the people who were around me and how I affected them, or they can read it and get a chance to write their point of view about the addiction side, the person who's actually dealing with it. So again, the book was just mainly to help people. So
Mhm.
whatever I could have put in here to try to make it more of a journal so people can start getting their thoughts out, that's what I did. Because originally I was hoping that I can eventually get this into schools, like high school level, because
Mhm.
teen suicides are starting to skyrocket. And it's because people can be high functioning depressions and high functioning anxieties where you don't even know that they're going through it. A lot of people in college had no idea that I was struggling with what I was struggling with. But if we can get it to a point where people are open about what they're feeling, we can prevent a lot of stuff from happening. So my end goal is to get this into schools on a high school level, where even if it's not shared with your class, but the teacher gets to read it, who can then give it to a guidance counselor, who can then reach out, because we have some warning flags in here, and we can start getting people help earlier. So end goal.
And I think that's a great end goal. I think, no matter what we set out to do, whatever we find our purpose, it should be for the betterment of other people. That's part of the reason this podcast exists, is that I think more conversations like what we're having, they need to happen, and people need to hear these conversations, because we never know. Someone can listen to this and think, wow, I really need to buy this book, or wow, I really need to address my mental health. And that could be a building block for them to make their lives better. And all we're sitting here doing is talking. And
Mhm.
that's one of the main reasons the Provoking the Conversation podcast came into existence. Um, I'm not trying to shoot for fame or anything like that. I'm really just trying to do what I thought I was put on this earth to do. But
Absolutely.
going back to your book, so you talked about some more of the positive parts. Like, you made one, you said about your mom being, you know, your role model and things like that. When you told your mom you was releasing your book, how did she react?
Um, so as soon as I decided I was going to turn it into the book, the first person I needed their opinion on it was my mom. Again, because I grew up with a single mom. She raised me and my brother, and we still had the world. And it's not till now that I pieced together how much she was struggling. So in that chapter, it's not all sunshine in her role model chapter. The reason why she was my role model is because I did see her struggle without her knowing I saw any of it. And so when I gave it to her, I was very nervous because my mom didn't know that I cut. My mom didn't know that I really had body image issues. She didn't know that I was struggling with eating disorder. She just thought I was fluctuating with weight and stuff like that. So when I gave it to her, and she read it, she called me and she was crying. And the first thing she said, she was like, "I had no idea that you were going through this." And she told me how one chapter actually reminded her of my grandfather. And then she started opening up to me and telling me some things I never knew about her and how we had more in common. And then she asked me if she could share it with her one friend who, when I lived in New York with her, she became a close family friend, and she shared it with her daughter. And that's when my mom's friend found out that her daughter was also struggling with body issues and really was struggling with mental health. And it became a way that that mom could get her daughter into therapy. And her daughter started therapy and is now much better off. So without my mom's approval, this book probably wouldn't have happened, but I was very nervous to share it with her because it does have very dark parts in it. But it's the truth. So her approval meant everything to me.
That's also amazing because a lot of people, you know, sometimes struggle with the relationship with their parents. The fact that you wanted to go to your mom and show her this before you did it or when you did it, um, that's I think that means a lot. With my parents, it's a similar. We're very close. We're very close knit, and I think that's important. And also, a lot of mental health too is how you're raised and how the people around you impact you. So the other part of the book, the other part that kind of stood out, you mentioned a couple chapters. I believe one was about, one talking to your future love and one talking about your lover. I'm not sure. I think one was definitely talking about your future lover. So what was that chapter about? Where did that come from? Because that caught
Um,
my attention.
so I do have multiple chapters where I was talking to people in my past who have affected me in a very negative way. I have had the experience in relationships that weren't the best relationships. I was in a lot of mentally abusive relationships, and I did deal with some aspects of physical abuse as well. So throughout this, it was important for me to finally open up about the negatives in the relationship because I'm someone who I confused the advice that you fight for love, but I confused it in the sense where I let a lot of things happen because I thought that if we got through the struggle, we're supposed to be together. We went, but there's some things that individuals should not have to deal with because they think that they're in love. So through those negative relationships, I kind of set new standards for myself. I learned the things that I never deserved to go through and I never want to go through again. So it was more so a warning for the next person who does decide to come in my life in a relationship aspect, that they know that everything is going to be a work in progress. I don't use my past. I won't use my past and necessarily assume you're going to do the same thing. I give everyone a clean slate until you start showing me that you're doing the tendencies of things that I have experienced in the past. So my past relationships just gave me knowledge, but it's not going to make me assume that all men are the same. All men aren't going to, if they don't call, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing this. Until you break my trust, you have my trust. But once you break it, I'm always going to be skeptical, but I'm not going to allow myself to proceed to let you break it. So it was just more so of the growth aspect of relationships, because that was one thing I really did struggle with. I really do give people way too many chances. So
Yeah, I'm similar in that aspect. But that's important to set standards for your relationship before it even happens or before you even meet that person, because then you can have that open conversation about, all right, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I will accept. What are you looking for and what will you accept? And you can kind of start off on that foot. Um, and you talked about not, looking at all men the same. One thing I will say about men, I actually have an episode about why men do certain things. Men are similar. We have similar tendencies, but no, we're not the same, because a lot of it is shaped by similar things that you talked about, your childhood, past traumas. And I think staying on the mental health train, male mental health is something that hopefully through this podcast, I can help address, from us just being more open with, females or with ourselves, or just being able to have those type of conversations. So you talked about the next person coming in your life. So I'm guessing there's nobody there right now, or do you have prospects, as they like to call them these days?
I don't want to say that I have a roster, but when I wrote it, I did not have anyone at the time. So yeah.
Gotcha. Well, Ashleigh, this has been great. I don't think I have any more questions. Was there anything that you wanted to add for our listeners? Anything about your book, what you do fitness-wise or mental health, anything that you wanted to kind of end this interview with for our listeners?
Basically, I just appreciate people taking the time. And again, I thank you for having me on the podcast to even just help bring awareness to what I do. But more so, it's just if anyone is actually struggling more so with anything fitness-wise or even just their mental health, my only goal is to just help one person so they can get to the point where then they are at the point where they are loving their life and then can hopefully pay it forward. I just want to start a trend where people can start learning, accepting, and then taking that into the world. So please add me on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and just let me be an advocate for you. Let me help you through whatever you need through. And if you read the book, you'll see that we probably have been through very similar situations.
Gotcha. Well, again, thank you. And one thing that I will do, because I'm always for it, if you come on my platform, I will come on yours. So I will have to, when you do one of your, I don't know, you do group sessions or you do things through Zoom, or I'll come to one. I might die halfway through it.
I won't let you die.
I might not make it. I might meet my maker, but that's okay. I'll do it because you came on my platform. I'll talk to you about, what works best, but I'll definitely come and do a session or a class or something like that, because I do thank you for coming on.
I appreciate it so much.
No problem. All right, so our listeners, once again, Ashleigh, she is a wonderful young woman. I will include the link to her book in the bio, or in the description of this episode. I'll also include things like your Instagram page as well, so people can go there and follow you and follow the things that you do. Ashleigh, thank you once again for joining. We hope to have you back on again at some point. Maybe you do a couple more things, maybe another book, maybe if we have a discussion about mental health, you can come join in and give it 2 cents. We'd love to have you.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Hit me up anytime.
All right.